If you've just opened this video without watching the introduction video, it would be best to go back there and watch it, as this video will make little sense to you if you haven't. Have a look again at an overview of development stages of consciousness and see where you think you are, and ask yourself why some people, even family members, are lower than you, and why some are above you in your own level of consciousness. Again, I'm going to stop talking so you can go over the stages for deeper understanding. I don't know who said it, but the following statement: if a theory cannot be proved in the world of practical living, then it is of no value except in theory, which epitomizes the importance of any material that we might read, and we need to ask, is it logical? The problem we have with logic is that anything logical in the realm of understanding ourselves can only be seen as logical from someone's stage of consciousness. If someone is at stage 2, for example, and looks up at the behavior of someone at stage 6, they'll not be able to understand why they behave the way they do. So, for example, they would think, why on earth would someone want to be freeing the human spirit from greed, dogma, and divisiveness? It would be illogical in their world for someone to do that. And if someone at stage 6 were to ask a stage 2 to take on such values, it would be almost impossible for them to do so. Hence the importance and value of acceptance of others lower down the scale's beliefs, and why we need to be non-judgmental. So if the site can be of any help, it will be in the form of giving, hopefully, a bit more meaning to the questions that haven't fully formulated in your mind, or, if they have formulated, hopefully provide a deeper insight than you are presently sitting with. Moving upwards from stage 1 and encompassing the drives within it is a natural progression towards actualization. Have a read of the following. It might be a good idea to stop the video here and think about it. So simply, as we move up the stages of consciousness, you are becoming more you. Because each iota of learning gives more consciousness, which adds more meaning to your growth process, which means greater being. So if you're at a stage 4, each iota of truth will move you, inclusive of any existing truth, to more truth, towards stage 6 and above. Naturally, whatever drive in any particular stage you are moving into, for example, harmony and equality, it's not going to happen overnight. You cannot force yourself into a higher stage or drive. It has to unfold naturally. And this is very important to understand when it comes to looking at why we are the way we are on the scale of consciousness. Consciousness has nothing to do with the family we were brought up in or the area we were born into. People from the poorest backgrounds make their mark on the world because of their empathy and compassion, which has to do with their stage of consciousness. While the richest, like certain presidents, prime ministers, and CEOs, do nothing but try to take humanity back into the dark ages. So where we were born or what family we were born into has nothing to do with our place on the consciousness scale. And nobody can give us consciousness. We earn it from learning through life experience, which then adds meaning. And if you look at the stages again, you would see it would be impossible to move up from the bottom to the top in one lifetime. So this still begs an answer to the question, why are we at our own level of consciousness? And there is only one logical answer. And maybe you need to fasten your seatbelt here. And that is that we have lived many, many, many lives that have brought us to this present level of consciousness we are now at, or rather you are now at. For a lot of people, schooled into the idea of a one life, this idea of living over and over can be a big shock and is instantly rejected as it smacks into their comfort zone of their present beliefs and upsets the idea of heaven, where we supposedly live in peaceful bliss for the rest of eternity. But before you discount the idea, I'd like to point out that even people who do believe in past lives have many false beliefs about them. Listen to my video, Misconceptions About Past Lives. Perhaps it might be an idea to stop this video now and think about the logic of past lives, bearing in mind that 1.1 billion people believe in them. So it's not a flash in the pan idea. Is there any other possible logical way we could accumulate the wisdom and consciousness that goes with each stage without having lived many, many lives to do this? Whether you believe you are a body or a mind or a soul, when you die, something leaves, which religion calls soul. Going back to the question above, why you are at your present stage of awareness is through learning. But by learning, in this case, I don't mean school or university learning, but the growth of wisdom. For example, the wisdom of harmony and equality, of reconciliation, of relationships, of freeing the human spirit from greed, dogma, and divisiveness, and so on. Just as a child doesn't learn his whole school education a day, we haven't acquired our wisdom in one lifetime. Bear with me, and I will attempt to present a more plausible concept of our journey that will hopefully appeal to your inherent wisdom. As humans, our soul, in its dimmest form, started its journey from almost complete unawareness, and at the end of each lifetime, took that wisdom with it forward into the next lifetime. And you have done this over and over and over again to where you are reading this with your present awareness. I said in the introduction that if a theory cannot be proved in the world of practical living, then it is of no value except in theory. Can past lives be proved in the world of practical living, along with logic? Yes, if we're prepared to put aside our own beliefs. But in order to do this, we first have to test that our own beliefs can stand up to logical or scientific testing. Do they? And this is really important. But before we get into this, let me tell you about an experience of mine as to how I became aware of past lives. I started sailing on dinghies when I was about 12, and no matter how strong the wind was or how rough the seas were, I was totally happy experiencing these conditions. I suppose it was because I was a good swimmer and knew that if anything went wrong on the boat, I could always swim my way out of danger back to land. My problem started when we went out of sight of land. The moment the land disappeared over the horizon and it was stormy or rough, a slow, debilitating fear crept through me, which more or less paralyzed me. The consequence of this was I shied totally away from deep-sea sailing. In my late teens and early 20s, my friends were participating in long-distance ocean racing or sailing around the world, and I, wimp here, always had an excuse. I was very ashamed to tell them the truth. If you read my About Colin page, you will see I became a counsellor at the age of 22. And in that training, I had a lot of counselling myself. And one of the issues that came up was my terror of sailing out of sight of land. I spent a good few months working with my counsellor, and while the focus had intended to be on the paralysing fear of the ocean, other stuff came up. And then in one session, something really dramatic happened. My counsellor was getting me to put my attention and feelings on times when I'd been paralysed with this fear while sailing, going earlier and earlier, from the age of 20 to when I first experienced the terror when I was about 12. When I recalled fully what had happened at 12, he asked me if there was an earlier time, and so I said no. He asked me just to focus on the feelings. Suddenly I was gripped in sheer panic, and with that panic was a holographic image of a big 17th century sailing ship in a huge storm, and me being blown off the mast into the sea while trying to manhandle the sails. The ship disappeared into the distance. Reliving or re-experiencing the terror and panic of that death was unbelievable, but slowly I was able to get a grip as the panic subsided. By seeing that death of me being blown off the mast and drowning, released the stuck terror of the emotions connected to the death, and I was now free of them, free from that terror of being in the ocean, on a yacht, out of sight of land. And to prove it to myself, I've sailed thousands of miles beyond the sight of land. My experience of overcoming unconscious fears or terrors by contracting a past life isn't uncommon. There are many books written that document the successes of healing incurable psychosomatic illnesses and physical problems, which highlight the importance of accepting past lives as a truth in this field. Just Google them and choose a book that looks interesting. One might argue that the mind can conjure up anything you want it to if you believe it badly enough. But the point is that if it is a fantasy, how could a lifelong terror or psychosomatic illness just dissolve? If imagining was all there was to it, we could just wish away our issues and fears and psychosomatic ills. My realization about overcoming my fear is an example of proving something in the world of practical living, that finding the source of a this life problem in an earlier life can help healing and understanding. Did Maslow know about past lives? As far as I know, he never wrote about them, and it's likely that had he mentioned them, it would not have gone down well, given the Christian beliefs of the West at the time. Wilber, co-author of The Stages of Consciousness, embraces this truth completely. Just read his book, The Atman Project. Perhaps the above has been sufficient to allow you to see how our intelligence and awareness can only be what it is because of our learning over many lifetimes. But if you're still in doubt, look at some of the beliefs of other religions and see whether they could stand up to the idea of, if a theory cannot be proved in the world of practical living, then it is of no value except in theory. Compare what I have presented today and the logic associated with other religions and other beliefs. Accepting the idea of past lives explains why we have the consciousness we have and why we are here to learn. And we have seen we cannot learn everything in one lifetime. But to what end is this learning taking us? The question seems unanswerable, except until a person has what is called a peak experience, which gives them a huge insight as to where we are going on our journey, which is on the next video called Peak Experiences. Naturally, there is a psychological side of why we are the way we are, and I cover these in the video Socialization and Parenting. Thanks for watching.